Yep, have to be civil. Okay, let's, as I said earlier, unfortunately, I have another video conference call at 10 o'clock. So I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I'd like the approval of the agenda. The recommendation that the agenda for the PSB meeting of Thursday, June 25th, 2020 be accepted as presented. Could I have a mover, Mike, and a seconder? Would that be Brett, wherever he is? Okay. All those in favor? It is passed. Moving on, any declarations of interest? There are no presentations or delegations. I think you all had enough time to go over the minutes of the meeting. And it's recommended that the PSB minutes dated February 27, 2020 be adopted as presented. Could I have a mover, please? Brett, and seconded by Mike. All those in favor, and it is passed. And anything in the communications and petitions, the action items, information items? No, then it's recommended that the items be received, noted, and filed. Have a mover, please. Brett Todd, seconded by Mike Ostrander. It is passed. We have any comment on the OPP letter in the security check and revenue or the OAPSB points? I think that was all part and parcel of the communications and petitions. Let's move on to the OPP report, and we think what we'll do is we'll just have the May report, and if there's any questions on the other 2 months, we can come in after that. So if we could now have the OPP report.
Okay, Mr. Chair and everybody, you've had an opportunity to review what Inspector Graves has sent you. So calls for interest for the month of May was a sexual assault and charged. A male and female met online and commenced a romantic relationship. While both were watching movies, the male became aggressive towards the female. He decided to pin her down and then commenced to sexually assault the female. The Granville County crime unit investigated the allegation of the sexual assault. Subsequently, the male party was charged with sexual assault, released on a promise to appear in an undertaking for court at a later date. For the month of May, as you have seen, pretty much close to a reduction in most calls for service, which was nice to see, which was the assaults from 6 to 1 from the previous year. We're down 58% year to date from 19 to 20. Which can be attributed to mostly a lot of the bars being closed and a lot of less drinking. So the assaults have taken with regards to that. Other crimes against person, which I described earlier in my PSB meetings. That's a combination of threats, harassment, any crimes against person. Those were down. They were up by 1, but year to date, we're down 20%. I can go into some detail as to what the 4 were, which again were harassment, which was a landlord dispute between a tenant and the landlord, where the landlord was stating that the tenant was harassing her. There was also threats between two male parties fighting over a girl. And that was, there was no charges in that. Both parties were spoken to. Then there was a thread over Snapchat where female parties stated that the Bloods from Ottawa were coming to, that there was a threat over Snapchat and they were coming to Prescott to deal with her, which was deemed unfounded, and there was some MHA issues. And then there was a threat to a gas attendant over a pay at pump where the customer felt that he had to wait too long for the attendant to allow the party to pay, and threaten the gas attendant. With regards to theft unders, we were down for the month of May, yet we are up year to date. A lot of those are still drive-offs, and we've had some, for the month of May, I had 2 stolen bank cards, 2 separate incidents. And then there was the remainder for the total year have been drive-offs. A lot of them have been solved by us. They still are scored as theft unders, and most parties have returned to pay the gas that they drove off on. Frauds, we've seen an increase in our frauds as of late, and a lot of them have to deal with CERB, the new CERB checks that are coming out. People are still forging. People are being defrauded in the sense that they've had their identity stolen, and they were supposed to get, they're claiming that they never received their CERB checks. A lot of these investigations are still ongoing. And then another one was a check online where they send you stating, we'll send you a check for $3,600. Please cash in and return the certain amounts to us. And that one is still being investigated. And so that's still being investigated. We have a lead on who the parties are. So that is being taken over by our crime unit. Our mischiefs are down from 7 to 3, and year to date we're down 8%. Mischiefs for the month of May resulted in what we call domestic mischiefs. A male party damaged a bunch of the property, of common property between the male and the female. So he was charged not only with domestic assault, but also with domestic mischief ×2. And then the third mischief was a vehicle that had been keyed within the town of Prescott. Trafficking, we had one, which was which is being investigated by our CSCU unit for an allegation of trafficking of crystal meth, which is one incident. Year to date, you see that we are at 5. They are all separate incidents of trafficking, and all are being investigated presently by our CSCU units for trafficking of opioids. So that could be anywhere from the fentanyl to the heroin to cocaine, and those are presently being investigated by our street crime unit. And the other one, like I stated, is the crystal meth. And these are all separate incidents, separate addresses within the community, and separate people that are dealing of these narcotics. As you see, we have for the month of May, possession charges ×2, year to date 3 again. For the possession, it was a search warrant by our CSC unit where they located crystal meth, just a small amount. So that's why the person was charged with 2 counts of possession. because of the small amount. There wasn't enough to proceed with a trafficking of crystal meth in that investigation. And that leads me to the end, where you can see the clearance rates. You see in the property crime, we're actually doing fairly well. We're doing, it's down, but year to date, when we do come to the end of the year, as our street crime unit investigates more break and enters, and we end up finding more of the people that are committing these, you'll see our clearance rates increase. So we're only into the 5th month of the year. By the end of the year, you'll see that our clearance rates will still increase, but 29% in comparison to some of the areas that I did a PSB yesterday, where we were only at 7%. So we're actually doing extremely well in the Prescott area for clearing our property crimes. So I'm looking at some of the questions that Matt had asked, and some being the drop in the 911 calls. You'll see that we had, where is it here? Hang up calls. We had 0 for May, year to date 13. And then in 2019, year to date, we had 60. The OPP has commenced a new policy for attending 911 calls. So anything that may come from a cell phone with a no callback, where it'll bounce off a tower and we're unable to locate who the phone belongs to, and the call taker will investigate further and see, is there any need for police to attend? Is there a vital emergency? If there's no address to relate back to that phone or the address, then we are deemed not to go, which is a cost saving overall for the municipality. So for that, you'll see a dramatic decrease in the 911 calls. You'll see also our noise complaints. For the month of May, we had 10. Year to date, we had 30. As to last year, we only had 1. So Sergeant Thibodeau and I looked into this further, and it was revealed that we have a dispute between neighboring parties. And just like we used to have with our noise complaints at the Ultramar and the trucks at the Canadian Tire, now we have 2 feuding parties, but there's also MHA issues, correct?
Right.
So we have MHA issues involved in one of the complainants that continue to call us, and drinking as well. So at this point, we are going to engage our community service officer with our counselor out of the Brockville Hospital to attend the location and see if we can offer any resources to assist that party, so that hopefully down the road, our calls for service will drop with regards to that. As you can see also, the neighbor disputes, we've gone from, we had 6 for May, year to date 24 as opposed to 11. Those are all related back to a lot of just these 2 parties. And when I looked on our system, our RMS system, there's also another address that I located where there are also 2 feuding parties as well, and MHA issues. So we have 2 feuding locations, both with mental health issues. Again, we'll engage our community service officer and get our counselor to assist us on that. So for the month of May, you'll see our cruiser hours were 169.5. Our marine patrol hours were 6. And our foot patrol hours were 26.75 hours. Unfortunately, our foot patrol, sorry about that. Our bike patrol hours, we did have some bike patrol hours, but they were put in as foot patrol. We're going to try and correct that because we did ask our officers to get out on the bike and into the park areas. So you'll see for the next PSB meeting, we'll have that corrected and we'll have more bike patrol hours. Still probably the same amount of foot patrol hours. For targeted media releases, as we stated, there was the fraud scam. We had two impaired charges, a domestic assault, and an HTA driver that was charged twice in one day in Prescott alone. We had no break and enters for the month of May, which was good to see. And again, probably due to COVID and everybody being home, which was good. We had high visibility of our officers within the downtown core, which assists in the businesses not being targeted as well. And during the reporting period, the community service officers was engaged in our situational table through conference sessions and emails. And I'll open it up to any questions that you may have.
Any questions, please?
No real questions, Mr. Chair. Just a thank you to Renee Gaston and the detachment for all their work these last few months. It's been obviously pretty challenging and different, what we've all had to deal with, and just want to thank them for their great work and their partnership with all the emergency related matters. One quick question, I guess, going back to February, just on the purple fentanyl. I just wonder if that's something new that we've got to be worried about, or just a variant on the standard old fentanyl issue we've been addressing for quite some time.
Well, I think it's not. We're not seeing a dramatic increase. We're not seeing a dramatic increase in the terms of fentanyl. Should we be worried with the purple fentanyl? For sure. It's a stronger dose, a stronger, I guess you would say, opioid than just the regular fentanyl. Our CSC unit is engaged very well with the sergeant, JP Perro, and maybe in the future I can have him attend and give a briefing as to what the more of the street drugs that we're seeing in Prescott. Is there a dramatic increase in the opioids versus all the other, like the ecstasy and the crystal meth and the cocaine? So I'll invite JP Perro, who's our community service, our CSCU sergeant, and he can explain that. But we're not seeing a dramatic increase per se in the purple fentanyl. In the fentanyl, yes, but not purple fentanyl.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to have an update on that. Thanks for the offer on that. It's obviously that's one of the major concerns within the community and the region overall. And I go back to the crystal, perhaps it seems to be the one that you hear the most about and people are concerned about in the area. So thanks a lot for that, Renee. That'd be great if we could get a report on that whenever the officer's available. Thank you.
Yeah. I know, like in Brockville, the crystal meth is a huge problem, speaking with the chief there on some conference calls. And obviously, being in close proximity to Brockville, it does carry over into here. So.
Thanks very much.
Any other questions?
Did Matthew, did you want us to discuss, or is that later in the meeting about the speed reduction for the Prescott?
I think we could tie that in with the letter from the mayor in new business.
Okay, we will wait then. I'll let Gaston speak on that because he's in charge of our TMO officers. So
Can he stay until the end of the meeting?
Yes, he can. Yes,
Oh,
he
okay.
can.
All right. So are there any other questions on the police, the May report? No? Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Mike Ostrander, seconded by Brett Todd, that the Police Services Board reports for February, March, and April and May be accepted as presented. All those in favor? And it's carried. Let's move on to the bylaw update from LaShawn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is just to keep everyone notified that there is going to be a couple new no parking areas in the town shortly, both on the south side of Dibble Street and on Boundary Street on the west side between Dibble and King. Those signs have been ordered. The locates are being done shortly and they will be up fairly quickly. Once they are put up, we will probably spend at least a couple weeks in the education phase where we put a nice little card on the car reminding them that it's been deemed a no parking area, and then if necessary move on to enforcement after that. Also, the new stop lines have been installed already at Edward Street and Churchill Road and Edward Street and King Street. It is kind of interesting when you go down there. Sometimes people realize where they're supposed to stop and sometimes they don't. Again, there might be some chances for education there. And also for all the parks and parking lots and stuff that are municipally owned, new signage has been ordered, or at least if it's not ordered, the plan's being made because it's already here to make sure every park has similar signs, that every municipal parking lot has no parking between overnight, and that if you want to park overnight, you have to have a permit. And again, the other things about no smoking, dogs on leash, pick up your dog after your dogs and stuff like that. All the standard signs that should be in every park should be up shortly. That's it for bylaw for the month. Any questions?
Any questions? No.
Morning. Sorry, I don't mean to cut in. Sean, I know we spoke about the issue with the stop signs and possibly the OPP and yourself and your bylaw officer teaming up to either educate or enforce. We're still engaged with our TMO officer on that, and we will let you know. Sergeant Thibodeau will let you know.
Not a problem. I appreciate that.
Anything else? Do we need a motion? We don't need a motion, do we, to accept? No? Okay. Is there anything under old business? Let's move on to new business then. I think the mayor has something. Well, the OPP wanted to bring something up. The change of the town speed limit.
I could speak to that just to start us off, Mr. Chair. I did bring forward a notice of motion to our last council meeting. Request that we direct staff to initiate the change to 40 kilometers from the current 50 in all of Prescott. Of course, we do have 40 now on Boundary Street, and also, of course, in the school zones, but Boundary's been a designated 40 for some time now. Notice significant increase in town speed, aggressive driving over particularly recent months with COVID, it seems, and it does seem like this is sort of a common problem based on some of the news reports coming out of other municipalities on surface streets in the towns with the traffic volume down with COVID and so many people either not working or working at home. It does seem to have kind of opened the floodgates for some aggressive driving on more deserted streets. And I think we've certainly seen that in town, particularly on both ends of King. Those have been problem areas for a little while now anyways. We did have some traffic run at the east entrance to town by the golf club. And I think the numbers were, and correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I thought when we did that last year, they were around 70K or 72K in the 50 coming into town. With the last numbers I think that we got. This is quite a while ago now, but I know it was fairly excessive, and it's just from observational driving around town, hearing complaints from residents. I know the 40K is not going to be a cure-all in any way, shape, or form, but I do wonder if it'll have a psychological effect in some way on drivers, because it seems now that whether this is a 401 effect or what it is, it certainly seems like even inside towns now, people push the limits and they're always doing that 10-20% over. So maybe if we go to 50, that means, or 40, that means people will be more driving in the 50 range, because 50 right now and a lot of Prescott seems to mean 60, 65, leading to a lot of aggressive passing also, even on Edward Street. I'm seeing a lot of passing on the right there, which can be problematic, of course, with people trying to get into stores along that road as well. So I brought it forward, and I guess it comes back to council at our next meeting on July 6th for deliberation and discussion. And the one thing I will add as well, I did bring it to MTO for some clarification on the signage regulations on that, because they did make the move a year or two ago to neighborhood signage, so you didn't have to put the I think the previous requirement through MTO for this, because 50 of course is the standard in the province, that going to 40 required signage almost on every street. And obviously that would have been a significant issue even for us with the cost of installing those signs. But I pitched the idea to MTO that we should be considered as one neighborhood, and they actually did agree. And it was incredible the rate of response, and that I think I got a full answer from MTO and vetted through MTO policy within like 12 hours a couple of weeks ago. We just guess we got lucky on that one, and they agreed. And so they've just basically, and we've got it in writing as well, that they would only require us to put the signage at the entrances to town. So on Edward Street and on King Street East and King Street West, where we'd have to put the 40. I'd suggest, and I'd mention this to council, that we'd add a couple other spots as well and key intersections to notify people that the community speed limit is 40. But other than that, the cost implications of the signage are actually pretty minimal here. Be looking basically at, I think, about six double-sided signs. They do recommend double-sided everywhere on that, just so people can see that, just in case if they're blocked by a truck or so on. So they ask you to take a little extra precaution, but even that's not an absolute requirement. So anyhow, the cost implications seem minimal. I certainly don't see any harm in going to the 40 based on what we're dealing with. So I did bring it forward, and Mr. Armstrong and I just batted around some options as well to try to get some of this under control. So there are other options as well that I think we'll be bringing forward at some point in the not too distant future to be considered by council, and of course to get the opinion here at Police Services Board. So that's basically it in a nutshell, and of course invite comment, and I would appreciate a motion of support on this from the board this morning if the other members are able to do so. Thank you.
Excuse me, I have one question about the 40 speed limit. What about our salt trucks? What's the optimum speed they have to travel at to properly salt the streets?
So they can travel at approximately 35 or 40 kilometers an hour to be able to do that salting. Usually they're doing plowing, which would decrease their rate of speed to begin with.
Okay, so they're well within the speed limit. Okay. Would someone like to put forward a motion? Mike Ostrander. Seconded by Brett Todd.
Mr. Chair, would you like us to, we've reached out to our TMO officers just to have their input on this. Would you like us to, Sergeant Thibodeau, to speak on this?
Please.
Okay, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I will certainly not profess myself as being a traffic expert. My background is more drugs and organized crime, but I am responsible right now for supervising 2 of our traffic management officers. That's what we call TMOs. So TMO officers, we have 2 here in Grenville, and their primary job is to mostly focus on traffic complaints and highway enforcement, traffic enforcement, etc. So that's what they do on a daily basis. So we turn to them and ask them for their opinion on the speed limit reduction for the town of Prescott. They are definitely, they testify in court almost as expert witnesses. So we thought it'd be safe and a lot more responsible of us to reach out to them. And I'm just going to quote some of the stuff that they told us in regards to the suggestion. One of the traffic officers said that in his opinion, he doesn't think that reducing the limit is necessarily going to make travelers or motorists reduce their speeds. And what's going to happen is that you're going to get the daily driver that goes in that used to travel at 60 kilometers an hour. The law-abiding citizens that are going to work are now going to be traveling 20 kilometers over the speed limit because they're still traveling at 60. They're thinking more along the lines of like narrowing lanes, adding speed bumps, painting speed limits, painting the actual speed limits right on the pavement, increased signage, digital signage, and bollards as well. That was one of the TMO officers. The other TMO officer, who actually works in Prescott quite a bit, was talking about, you know, adding traffic lights at the corner of Boundary and King. And that is, I definitely agree with Mr. Mayor on this one. That is a really nasty spot between New Wexford and Edward Street. There's a hill and there's a curve right at Boundary, which actually means that, you know, coming from Boundary and heading west on County Road 2 is a treacherous endeavor at best of times. And then if you add the speed or the characteristic of increased speed to it, it's a lot more dangerous. So maybe a light at the corner of Boundary and King Street. Same for Sophia and King, maybe a light there. He was very big on a possible traffic light at the corner of County Road 18, which is Edward Street, and the exit off of the westbound 401. So there's a light at the corner of Prescott Center Street on the south side of the 401. He's looking at a light on the north side as well. And again, a four-way stop sign at the corner of Center and Jane Street. Again, that's a pretty difficult intersection. People are coming down south on Center Street, and it's hard to see who's coming. And they are driving fast down those streets because there's hills. So they're looking at it more from a perspective of increased signage and maybe some more traffic control in terms of lights and stop signs. I have to admit, I was a little surprised by their response. They're the pros. I was sort of the opinion, well, if you reduce the signage to 40, well, maybe that'll force people to drive. If they were driving 60, I agree with Mr. Mayor, maybe that will make them drive 50. It's an interesting perspective from traffic specialists that maybe shed some light onto the situation. I do not profess myself as being a traffic expert, but I did work at one point with an officer who wrote his master's and I think maybe even his PhD, but wrote theses, more than one, on impact of traffic controls and speed limits, etc. Has written thesis on this, and I'd like to reach out to him about that. He is now an inspector in a traffic management unit, and I would really like to elicit his opinion on whether or not reducing speeds in a town can actually reduce the speeds of motorists. I'd be very curious to see what his opinion would be on that. And but it seems like it's almost like there's a science to this, or almost like a psychological perspective on this. And I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. I would have thought for sure that changing a sign from 50 to 40 would make people reduce their speeds. And maybe that's not the case. I don't know enough about the science behind it. I'd like to do a little bit more research on it. But for what it's worth, these are the opinions of the traffic management officers, and we just thought we would share that with you today.
Thanks very much for that. It's good information. And one of the things that just sort of informed me a little bit, I mean, it goes back, I think, to 2012. I think it was the Ontario coroner brought open a recommendation to move down to the 40, and it's never really been acted upon, of course, by the province. But the numbers brought forward in that coroner's report were fairly striking about the fatality rate with vehicles traveling at 50 compared to those traveling with pedestrians. Collisions involving vehicles and pedestrians, the fatality rate was, I think, significantly higher at the 50 than it was at the 40 and even the 30. And of course, we do see, I mean, it does seem to be kind of a move across the board. So I think we're going to probably you may get a whole wide range of opinions on this based on what we're seeing in other municipalities. Ottawa's obviously, they've moved even to 30 in a number of smaller neighborhoods, and they've put up the median, the little signs, and done all sorts of measures there with speed bumps and everything else to really reduce speeds in those congested neighborhoods. And I'd say Prescott in many ways is just like one of those little neighborhoods in Ottawa. I'm not suggesting the extreme of going down to the 30, but I do think 40 is worth trying. At least it certainly won't cause any harm. And I think in conjunction with some of the other efforts, I am a little concerned. Some of the suggestions are some aren't going to be that workable either. I mean, James Street, that's been James and Center. We've had issues in Center for some time now, but it is a hill, and putting a four-way stop on that could be a recipe for some real problems in the wintertime because of the hill there. We've looked at a couple other areas like that as well. We've had collisions at the corner of Center and Water Street as well, because that's kind of a blind corner. And we did have a recommendation for a four-way stop there that we turned down last year simply because we'd have people sliding right through that intersection and excuse me, in the wintertime. So it's I do hope council moves forward on this and we work in conjunction with the OPP and the other measures. I think the speed bumps, maybe more some more lighting is possible. But when we talk about adding traffic lights, I'm assuming they mean full traffic lights. And we just went through a very long process and had the traffic numbers done by the OPP traffic officers there that indicated we didn't need the lights in those two locations on King Street. We did remove those. And of course, maybe that is impacting on this somewhat. Although I would say the problem is not so much in the downtown core, but on the outside where the speeds are quite extreme coming in from the west and the east on King. So it's a difficult one to look at. I'm more than happy for to receive information from experts across the board, so we're fully informed on it. But at the same time, I'm fairly committed in my support of moving to it to try it. We have had the request at different times from residents too to move it in certain areas in town, but it really, in some ways, to me, it doesn't make sense to do it on Sophia Street. We've already got it on Boundary, and most people don't even know it's the 40K is on Boundary actually, because it's only that one street in town, and it's signed along that stretch, but I don't think the average person's really aware of it. So I'm kind of committed to trying it with some of the research I've done, and at least my support of it. But I do think all the other areas, I think a lot of things need to be on the table here with regards to getting the speed down and additional enforcement, of course, as well. And you guys have been great in upping that recently. So I thank you so much for that, because we have had some specific incidents that I've reported and I've had reported to me from residents in town. So like I said, I think my opinion is that it's worth trying, especially with the cost, and I don't see any downside to it. In addition, though, I do think we have to look at the other measures as well, and I think that's going to require some more research and some more discussion and some costing and so on. That's got to come back to this group and to council, because what you mentioned, Gaston, there's some pretty expensive options there too. And not that you can put a price on safety, but you kind of have to put a price on safety, because we have to budget things at the end of the day. But we want to make it as effective as possible. And this seems like a low cost option to at least explore and try it out. And I should also say I did have a date on my motion to implement this before the start of the school year. So we'd be prepared for that and the rise in traffic, particularly along Edward Street when the high school and the public and the separate schools go back to school. And well, we see when they go back to school. Hopefully it's September, but I don't think that's entirely clear. So anyways, that's just my long rambling comments there. I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
I still would be interested in seeing those recommendations if perhaps we could have them included in the next PSB agenda. And also, if you can continue on with talks with the inspector to see what his feeling is on it. Your friend on the traffic.
Yes, for sure. We'll add those to the next PSB meetings in terms of the opinions of our TMO, and Sergeant Thibodeau will look into with the inspector on his thoughts with regards to his ideas of traffic safety and the 40 kilometer. I was in line with Sergeant Thibodeau as well, and Mayor Todd in regards to the 40 kilometer zone. I've seen it in certain areas in the communities I live in. Also with what we call bollards, which are those plastic where they're what do you call it, drilled into the ground, and they're movable. If a car does hit it, it won't break. It is cost effective in terms of the other alternative, which is a traffic light, which I understand is a huge cost to the municipality. But those are our other effective areas. Even if you do reduce the speed limits to the 40 and you want to put those up in the school areas, which will also decrease the speeds as well, because cars do have to slow down to go into them. So we will for sure forward those to you guys in the next PSB meeting.
Thank you. Is there anything else to add? I think we still have a motion, do we not? I think it was moved by Mike Ostrander, seconded by Brett Todd. All those in favor? Carried. Is there anything else before we move on? No questions?
Stan, I just wanted to thank both officers for bringing that forward this morning. It's good to get all that information. And as mentioned earlier in some of the emails and some of the correspondence we've shared about some of these issues, that it's just start of a dialogue, and maybe we look at a lot of different options, and good to have everything on the table. I like the option of starting with the 40 as a way of moving into this, but all the other options I think need to be on the table, and we've got to have a good dialogue about this. So really thank both officers for coming forward with all that information this morning and getting it out there for us, because we really do need that to address this problem for the community. Thank you.
Okay. Anything? Yes, Mike.
Just an extra thank you to the OPP for getting the TMO officer to come down for a few shifts, hopefully. That's been done in past years during our, I guess you could say, our summertime times, and it has worked. They concentrate on traffic, and they don't get called away to other calls usually, so that leaves them dedicated to the very complaints that we were making in the past week or so. So thanks again, guys.
Anything else? Anything under the PSB public service announcements? No?
Could we focus on the speed issue on that? Or they usually ask for a recommendation from us. And thanks also for the note on the crosswalk vandalism last week. I think that press release going out got some more attention as well on that. And luckily we haven't been hit again since. So I would suggest something maybe on the speed, particularly now that the beach is open. We do have a lot of kids traveling, walking back and forth at King and St. Lawrence. So if there's any possibility of the public service announcement focusing on watch your speed in areas kids are out, beach, the usual, if everyone's okay with that.
Yeah, Kimberly? Okay. Is there anything else before we move to adjournment? No. Any recommendations? Should we meet in July? Mike?
Well, it's sort of up to the admin people if they think we required to keep ahead of some of the notices coming out or bulletins or whatever, if not, dealer's choice, I guess.
Matthew?
I think if we wanted to have one in July to discuss whatever comes out of council in terms of the recommendation on the 40 kilometers an hour, then that might be appropriate. And then we can go from there.
Okay. What is a good, should we do aim for the Thursday, the last Thursday in July? Or is everyone available? Is it 23rd? We
Maybe
available
the
for
23rd or the 30th, depending on how you want to do that.
the OPP?
Yeah, we should not have an issue on the 23rd. I'm just going to double check here. 1 second. I don't see anything on my agenda, and I know if I remember correctly, just stand by. I'll just double check to make sure Inspector Graves is around and or Sergeant Thibodeau. Sorry, I'm just clicking on a bunch of things here.
Mm-hmm.
Stand by. So I know Gaston is here, so that's good. And 23rd, yep, we are all here, so that is good for us.
Okay. I guess at this time, we don't know. We'll probably aim for another Zoom call or video conference call. But if that's okay with everyone else, it's recommended that the meeting adjourn to July 23rd, 2020 at 8:30 a.m. All those in favor? It's carried. And it is 9:17. Sorry, what was that?
I recommend if that's what Mayor Todd's background is, we do it on the beach at his place.
I wish. I'm in the smallest room in my house, so I made the horrible decision to move my office in here a few years ago. Didn't exactly expect to be trapped here as often as I am.
I take it that's a back image.
Yeah. Yeah, I've just got a wall of books right behind me. It's not nearly as scenic.
Okay. If there's nothing else, then thank you very much for your time. And we look forward to seeing you on the 23rd. Hopefully in person, but obviously with the way things are going, let's be optimistic. And have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks now.